Well, we're back with more Bookworm. Last volume we saw the culmination of Rosemind's explosive third year in the academy, while hinting at the major cultural shift she's spearheading nationwide. And assuming we're following a similar pace to part 4, you'd think this would be a slower paced book reflecting on the implications of that back home. But be pleasantly surprised. I don't know if you've been following along, but Ehrenfest had a ton going on over winter. Now we're back to deal with the former Veronica faction's downfall, the Lies Gang's consolidating power, and Rosemind not just trying to hold the duchy, but her family together as well. This volume has a lot to cover, but before we get into that, here's your obligatory call to action to subscribe. That's how you stay up to date on Bookworm content from me. And hey, I'm still selling merch as well. Rosemind Garden, Dunkelfelger Ditter Team, and of course the Ehrenfest Gremlin design are available. We got those on shirts, stickers, and a bunch of other stuff. Check it out. So with that out of the way, let's finally get into Part 5, Volume 4. The prologue begins from Lamprecht's perspective. Weird, we rarely hear much from him. He's called into Karstadt's office after the purge, expecting to be given some leave. Typically, adult retainers of underaged Archduke candidates get a ton of time off during the winter, but obviously the purge and Lord of Winterhunt meant that didn't happen. Hell, Lamprecht is kind of annoyed that Rosemind's knights got time off anyway, but Karstadt sets him straight. They were serving at the Ob's request, which is why they were exempt from training, but in actuality, they just didn't want to publicize that they were doing the work of blue priests. But still, now it looks like Rosemind's retainers are being shown favoritism. That's the opposite of what they wanted. Now that might clear up when word gets out about the Zent's new appreciation for religious ceremonies, but that's gonna be down the line. However, Lamprecht is pleased he's still getting time off here. Finally, he gets to see his wife and newborn son, but Karstadt's been getting the least amount of time off as of late in the entire order, so he's really looking forward to the chance when it does actually come. But that's not today. Lamprecht heads over to the northern building to hand notice over to his fellow retainers, who are blissfully ignorant about their futures, assuming they avoided the brunt of the purge and their lord's gonna protect them. But that's just some serious cope, because retainers can't be dismissed without their lord present, so really it's just a matter of time. And when Lamprecht gets home, he's first greeted by Elvira. Aurelia moved into the main building during the purge at Elvira's suggestion. The reason being it would help ease suspicion around her, given the other bride taken alongside her was executed as a spy. On top of just giving birth, it made a nice excuse to avoid questioning for a while, but Elvira set up the groundwork by declining every invitation from the former Veronica faction for Aurelia in her name, basically saying Aurelia has nothing to do with them in the process, which has actually been a welcomed relief for Aurelia. But the more pressing concern is Lamprecht is stoked to see his son. However, Aurelia did a ton of preparations to ensure she could eat dinner that night with the family herself, so the kid is with a nurse. But dinner isn't exactly a super pleasant chat, as the immediate fallout of the purge becomes the main topic. It's explained that a ton of archducal family member retainers were let go or imprisoned, and Trudolita was among them, having been Veronica's attendant before marrying Karstadt, and still putting in a ton of work for her lady and Georgine. Her son Nicholas is still currently in the playroom, not being taken in by Karstadt due to a few factors we'll learn about later on. Most relevant to the people having this conversation is he's a knight in training, and Aurelia just had a kid. She may have been Detlin's guard knight back in the academy, but pregnancy hasn't exactly left her in peak condition to fight off an attacker, so they don't want any threats around. But speaking of the kid, due to Aurelia's past and uncertainty in the duchy, they're keeping Lamprecht's kid a secret until he's baptized, even from the extended family. The reason being the Lies Gangs are extremely vocally against Arnsbach at the moment. The future successor to Karstadt's estate having Arnsbach blood would only cause problems, though Aurelia does say to tell Rosemind discreetly at the castle. They can't exactly invite her over to tell her because that would only fuel the Lies Gang's hopes that she's aiming to become Archduchess. Lamprecht thought that the purge had swept away the Lies Gang problem for good by addressing their biggest concerns, but Elvira scolds him for being naive. The previous Geeb Lies Gang and great-grandfather to goddamn near half of Ehrenfest has finally died, and saw this purge as his divine vengeance being granted. Apparently that petrified husk of his was running on pure spite, because without that grudge keeping him going, he finally kicked the bucket, with his dying wish that Rosemind be made up. Remember how everyone, and by everyone I mean Rosemind and Wilfried, thought that was all taken care of? Well, it wasn't, and the adults in Charlotte knew that. A simple chat isn't gonna wipe away decades of abuse, and as I talked about just last video, the older someone is, the longer their memory tends to be. That works for nobles as well as duchies. Veronica being imprisoned was basically yesterday to them, but the decades of abuse feel like an entire lifetime. This hate boner isn't stopping at Veronica anymore. I mean, it might have if Sylvester actually did something about his mother when he first came to power, but he didn't. So her entire bloodline's the target now, because the Lies Gang's wanted out of the Archducal family. And who is their only hope who doesn't have a drop of Veronica's blood? Well, Rosemine, of course. Part 4 set up the Lies Gang's place in their struggle in Ironfest, but these next few books will focus on the fallout now that they're in power. Remember a while ago I said the Lies Gangs are not the good guys in this story. They're just sympathetic at the time. So Wilfried can't escape Veronica's shadow, and Rosemine will always be connected to Lies Gang through blood, supposedly. Well, Lamprecht just had the greatest idea ever. Why not have Rosemine wrangle them for Wilfried? That's what all of his adult retainers keep saying. Elvira just flat out calls him an idiot for even suggesting that. Rosemine doesn't socialize with them, and she's kept away for a reason. Elvira tells Lamprecht to shield Rosemine if anything else, even if Wilfried tries to push her to lead the Lies Gangs. But their biggest threat in any of this is the Lies Gangs approaching Bonifacius to throw his weight behind Rosemine for Ob. Why? Simple. He doesn't like her going to the temple. He thinks Wilfried is disgraced already, so send him instead. Elvira leaves him with one last warning. Don't let Wilfried provoke the Lies Gangs no matter what. So with that, they call dinner there, where Lamprecht finally heads to his wife's chambers to see his son. He hasn't seen him since he was born, but he's definitely grown. They chat a bit about her life in the main building, their situation, where Lamprecht is confident that Wilfried will do just fine, because of his personality and apathy towards factions. But Lamprecht didn't read last book's side story, and this last little bit is where we get some world building, where this kid, despite almost being a season old, still doesn't even have a name. So Lamprecht finally decides on one, Zigrecht. So back to Rosemine's perspective, she's finally home from the Royal Academy. The Archduke candidates all left at the same time this year and are being rushed to the northern building. Bonifacius is there to greet her once again, but as she tells him about how the awards ceremony went, she notices that he's on the lookout. Are things still dangerous? Well, kinda. They're being cautious, because there's still a lot of nobles in the castle from winter, and the northern building is the only place they can move freely due to the barrier surrounding it. Sucks to be Melchior. He's been cooped up there all season. So Bonifacius sees them off down the hall, and they're all looking forward to having dinner together. This already sets the mood we're in for this volume. However, the key difference is Ferdinand's not there to protect Rosemine and guide her through her schedule. So she actually has to deal with all this tense political bullshit she's been avoiding for the last 2 parts. So they get to chat with Melchior for a bit and find out that he's been confined to the northern building to keep him safe during the purge. Makes sense, but sucks he didn't get to make friends or scout for future retainers this season. That night at dinner, the entire Archducal family is gathered so they can discuss what happened at the academy. And while the adults are all pleased about the kids' achievements and how they held the dorm together, this chat is carefully curated by Sylvester to give everyone a break. Because in 2 days, they're going to hold a private family meeting with only select few retainers allowed to attend. The next day, Rosemine introduces her new name-sworn retainers to her adult ones. Cornelius makes a comment about Matthias being Guy Gerlach's son, but this is less about whether he can be trusted, and more about how accepting him will reflect on Rosemine, as Daniel points out, because Cornelius is kinda bad at saying that. Basically, things won't be as easy as these kids giving their names, because the duty of redeeming them falls on their lords and ladies. After introductions, she explains the pecking order and Rosemine breaks them off into teams to handle their respective tasks, while she hits up her hidden room to look over the bag with Ferdinand's assignment she received during breakfast before the graduation ceremony. She's mostly excited to hear some well-deserved praise, but with the magic tool is also a letter. So she reads it, and it details how the tool does actually contain his praise, not research instructions. But if she uses this outside her library's hidden room, it'll just delete the messages. Good thing she read the letter first, but something is interesting about the bag itself. It feels like there might be more inside, despite it being empty. Is there a false bottom? We'll find out in a few volumes, so just tuck it away for now. So she exits her hidden room, disappointed about being denied her very good from Ferdinand. Being stuck in the northern building isn't all bad though, since Rosemine can actually get some reading done. She's got quite the backlog, but she's interrupted by a sudden request for a meeting from Lamprecht. Of all people. I mean, that's fine. So after lunch, they let him in for some tea with Cornelius, Leonor, and Angelica taking watch. But the obvious topic is obvious, even for the audience. Rosemine pieces it together right away and congratulates him on his son's birth. But that parade is swiftly rained on when it's explained they're not allowed to spread word even among their family. Sad day. because Rosemine was looking forward to doting on that baby, especially since she can't see Sylvester and Florencia's until after its baptism. This seems a little overboard, but as this volume goes on, and even over the next few, we'll see the measures that the Lies gangs are taking against those they perceive as a threat. With Aurelia being from Arnsbach and Lamprecht the successor, there was a discussion about it because Eckhart was supposed to be, obviously, but since he left for Arnsbach, that left the two of them. Cornelius is leaving their house to deny the Lies gangs more influence. The reason being he's marrying Leonore, a prominent Lies gang, so this could actually create some friction. After talking about how hard Aurelia has been working, and Cornelius and Leonore going for the traditional year engagement bare minimum before getting married, the topic shifts to Nicholas of all people. Yeah, it's news to Rosemine that he's still in the playroom, and she's wondering why Karstedt hasn't gone to get him out of there. But the side building he was living in is closed down because his mother's not getting out of prison for a while. Wait, why would they stick him in the side building though? Can't he just go live in the main one? Well, no, that's out of the question. Aside from Aurelia's weakened state and new child, Elvira can't care for him without his mother's consent. She would have to adopt him to make that work, and that would cause issues when his mother finally comes back from her punishment. The perspectives here are pretty different. Rosemine thinks he's pretty innocent, but they have no clue what his mother's been putting in his head since birth. And that pretty much sums up the situation. They'd rather not trust him. But this brings up how many children are in the playroom after all the punishments have been doled out. Quite a few. So maybe they could be moved to the orphanage to ensure they're at least getting an education, right? That's a hell of a suggestion, considering these kids have already been baptized as nobles. So since this is firmly in business territory now, Rosemine has them bring in Hartmut to get an update on the temple side of things. And we find out about 5 of the pre-baptized children have been claimed. The rest are just gonna be stuck there. As for her suggestion of taking the playroom kids in, that's probably not gonna go over. Even Hartmut showing resistance to that, mostly because it would cause friction, as these kids are already used to a noble lifestyle. Wilfried comes in next to try and stop her, since his perspective is informed by his own experience as a criminal. He had to overcome it with all those eyes on him, so her protecting these kids seems pretty unnecessary. But then he drops the bombshell that Rosemine shouldn't be worrying about all the kids. Just focus on Nicholas because he wants to serve her as a guard knight when he enters the academy. Well, sounds like Cornelius has some explaining to do. The family's been keeping this from her, but it obviously wasn't going to go anywhere. His mother is a strong supporter of Veronica, so they couldn't ever really trust him. But hell, his mother wasn't letting him do it either. Instead, they were pushing him to serve Wilfried. But Wilfried fires back that he's requesting to serve Rosemine, not him. But really, Rosemine's so quick to sympathize they can't really let her speak with him, as it would create an opening for people to exploit. Well, time for the meeting, and it's a packed one. Sylvester drops the first payload of Florencia's pregnancy, which stuns Wilfried and Charlotte into silence. Rosemine already knew though, so she takes the initiative to congratulate her. Obviously, this threw a wrench into that whole second wife plan, and Charlotte's biting her tongue here. But no time for that, they move on to the purge details. Gerlach's estate had a large number of people not registered as citizens of Ehrenfest when they raided. So, what? Did he have nobles from another duchy there? Unlikely. As Rosemine points out, these are probably devouring soldiers. Hell, we know he already has those. Not just the audience, but the people there too. But as to whether Guy Gerlach is dead, Bonifatius isn't so sure. They found his arm and identified his mana, but Bonifatius didn't actually see him explode himself, though the likelihood of him escaping is practically none. Since the estate was surrounded, Sylvester put the city barrier to max strength, and only he can make people transporting teleportation circles within the duchy. So that would just leave the sewers, but there's those slime things down there. However, to be safe, they pulled all the Ehrenfest nobles they identified there as medals, and performed an official execution. Now, just to be clear, this is the same spell we saw Ferdinand use back in part 3, and it can't actually go over duchy borders. So they're going to be operating on the assumption that Grausum is dead. We do actually get some confirmation that Rosemine knows how to do that spell now, since Ferdinand taught it to her before he left, and she actually knows the name of the gods for it. Presumably it wouldn't have worked before she got those. So to wrap this up, their new namesworn will be taken by the Knight's Order to their family's estates to open up hidden rooms and look for evidence, though Rosemine makes damn sure they're not going to be mistreated when that happens. New Geebs will need to be assigned to those territories, and re-registering those lands will destroy their hidden rooms, so the investigation has to happen before that. And with that, Sylvester then brings up the last point of this meeting. As much as it sucks, the students have stood out way too much in the academy, and the adults just can't keep up, so they're requesting they quit trying to raise their rank, and actually would appreciate it if they'd drop it back down to 10th place. Wait, really? Yeah, as it turns out, This is coming from Rosemine's support base. This is the will of the Lies gangs. Rosemine is stunned, but Karstedt and Sylvester explain that after the Purge, they're the dominant force in Ehrenfest. The previous Geeb Lies gang died after the Purge, and they tell her that his last wish was for her to be Ob. Wilfried asks what that has to do with lowering their rank, and Florencia explains with a pretty sad look that the Lies gangs view this as pointless, now that they don't have to oppose Arnsbach internally anymore. Due to Ehrenfest's sad internal state, they believe no one would be happy if their rank keeps going up. This hits Rosemine like a truck, telling her that all her hard work and motive she's used to unify the dorm in the past 3 years isn't appreciated. And that's also like a complete 180 from what Sylvester told her during the tournament. But he says the only person who really needs to rein it in is her. She's the only one actively interacting with upper-ranked duchies in the royal family. That's Sylvester telling her to stop standing out, so people quit trying to support her for Ob over Wilfried. The Geeb she's spoken to know she doesn't want the job, but most haven't actually spoken to her, so they assume she's still trying. That basically killed her buzz from the Interduchy tournament in one fell swoop, but what's causing this? Are the Lies gang serious here? We'll find out how deep this runs and what it means this volume. Okay, so now she's bitter, but swallows it down and gets passive-aggressive. She hands over the schematics for the Holdenzell stage she copied from the Underground Archive over to Wilfried. That way he has something to show the Lies gangs to gain their support, and declares she's basically gonna retreat to the temple to handle printing, merchants, and handover process with Melchior. She won't stand out there, will she? Sylvester actually shoots her down here, saying she needs to spend more time in the castle getting socializing experience as the future first wife, and taking over Florencia's share of the work, but she has zero interest. Not because she doesn't want to help Florencia, but she's bitter as hell, and knows for a fact that Sylvester hasn't raised any scholars to handle the lower city still. Hell, the Purge has only made that less likely. However, as I've covered already, Rosemine has matured quite a bit mentally by this point, and fights back. You know, Ferdinand left, so the temple actually needs her to run it now. The harvest is going to be impacted if she's not there, so she says give all that work to Charlotte. Wilfried of all people actually argues back, saying Rosemine needs socializing experience for their next year in the academy. But then again, I don't see him making connections with upper-ranked duchies besides Ortwin. Who the hell's he to talk? Also, aren't they trying to lower their rank? He says leave all her temple and merchant work to scholars. But these are the same scholars who can't adjust to their rank in the first place. Yeah, sounds like some capable hands right there. Alright, we get it. Rosemine is needed everywhere, and Charlotte comes to her aid by saying it'll be years before she's actually needed as the first wife, since Florencia and Sylvester are still young enough to be having kids. But on top of that, they're asking this of her when they just crushed all her efforts in the academy? Yeah, she actually goes on to lay into her parents here quite a bit, calling out Sylvester in particular for his irresponsibility in getting Florencia pregnant, and putting off getting a second wife as a result. There's no dancing around it anymore. This volume brings the struggle of pregnancy into focus. This also leads into why women aren't exactly ideal obs. With Florencia, we're seeing she'll be unable to offer mana to the Foundation and do her normal workload. And then with Aurelia, we're seeing it takes about another year on top of that for baby's mana to stop being influenced by its parents. She won't be returning to work for like another 1.5 to 2 years, with engagements taking about a year plus to finish. Yeah, Sylvester just delayed getting a second wife by 2 years minimum when they're already short on manpower. So this was a really stupid move right now. This is also why archduchesses need to marry archduke candidates exclusively. That way their husbands can run the duchy while they're out for pregnancy. And here's the thing, this isn't even the end of this fuck up. What about Groshel's renovations though? We were literally talking about that at the Interduchy tournament. Yeah, it'll have to be delayed since they're even shorter on mana without Florencia helping. That's gonna make them look even worse to the Lies gangs, and Guy Groschel, who he was just winning over. On top of putting them back yet another year on expanding their business slots, disappointing even more duchies in the process. What are they gonna do? Looks like they'll have to push it back to autumn, but that's only gonna create unreasonable demands for the commoners as a result. Okay, so they need to reprioritize things here. Let's not forget, the Lies gangs are Ehrenfest nobles, meaning Sylvester outranks them, and he can shut them up if necessary. But Groshel's renovations directly impact interduchy relations, where the royal family literally just got done scolding Ehrenfest on their behavior, so making sure it succeeds is even more important than appeasing the Lies gangs. Rosemine proposes that Sylvester takes the lead here, which has its own problems, but she explains they're using Groschel to help fill in Ehrenfest's shortcomings, so he needs to be the one to offer support so the Geeb doesn't get blamed for it failing. But really, the main thing here is, it doesn't have to be done sequentially. Scholars can make the schematics so they can get the dimensions off to workshops so they can build the doors and window frames before the Endfinkel even happens. They have a ton of confiscated furniture from nobles who were punished, so they can use that to fill the inns, cutting down on costs and time. Sylvester can use his authority to mobilize the lower city in Ehrenfest too. That'll help out the Groschel craftspeople so they're not overwhelmed. And suddenly, this might actually be feasible. Alright, it's settled then. Everyone has their roles. Wilfried will take on Ferdinand's work with Bonifatius helping, Sylvester will support Groschel, Rosemine will handle the temple and merchants, while Charlotte gets Ehrenfest internals organized. But what about poor Melchior? Well, he can help her in the temple, which sounds pretty awesome to him, though his retainers aren't too pleased. Sylvester orders it officially and they try to wrap up the meeting, but Bonifatius approaches Rosemine about leaving the temple to go work in the castle, but she shoots that down real quick, saying she'd rather be there forever than in the castle. Well, everyone else seems to like that response, but Bonifatius is a bit sad by it. That meeting was packed with a ton of information, but the key takeaways are thus: the will of the Lies Gang supporting Rosemine, Wilfried and Sylvester wanting her to take up more socializing work in the castle, Groschel's renovations, and Bonifatius wants to get her out of the temple. Those are going to be our plot threads for the rest of this volume. On the way back, Melchior and his retainers are asking questions about the temple. They're showing some clear reluctance about going, but Rosemine explains how divine protections can be obtained after graduation, and could actually help those who are too old to benefit from her mana compression method, which is welcome news to the older generation. They were getting kinda jealous that the younger ones were getting so far ahead, but she explains how prayer is important and they need to take it seriously. From there, they ask some serious questions about what Melchior will need, and she details it all. But that does mean that he's gonna need a budget, so she has to schedule another meeting with Sylvester about that. But Hartmut says they already have one scheduled anyway. They have another matter related to the temple to discuss, and that's how low on blue priests they are after the purge. So they need to figure out what they're gonna do about that, otherwise they're gonna suffer. But hey, an idea just popped into her head. Could they treat the playroom children as apprentice blue robes? That would solve a lot of their problems in the long term. And the more they think about it, the more benefits they see. It would get Melchior acquainted with them, get them an education, and it would also help with their mana shortage. But what would convince Sylvester is this would actually ease Florencia's burden, since she's responsible for the kids in the playroom currently. Charlotte tries to protest because this is increasing Rosemine's workload even more, and she's been trying to stop that, but also she's awfully optimistic, considering how bad they trashed her in that meeting over Ehrenfest's rank. Speaking of, Wilfried went along with that pretty readily. What the hell's that about? He snaps at them, saying something about him and Sylvester before realizing he's saying something he probably shouldn't be. Then he clams up and says that they have other things to prioritize before taking his leave. But this distance from the meeting has given Rosemine some time to think. Again, this was pretty much the opposite of what Sylvester said to them in the dorm. He specifically mentioned the will of the Lies Gangs in the meeting too. But what does that mean exactly? Suddenly some pieces are falling into place, and she suggests to Charlotte that they don't lose faith in Sylvester just yet. They should be asking the Lies Gangs about their will in person. After all, they have prominent Lies Gangs in their service. She wants to hear what they have to say and if the adults and students are all in agreement, and Hartmut is pleased as hell that she noticed that little remark. The answer to what is the will of the Lies Gangs comes up a bit quicker than expected, but then again, in previous parts, Ferdinand would have investigated it himself and then presented his findings to Rosemine. We're seeing her do that herself now, because she actually has a decent intelligence network even without Eustace. So in her chambers, Rosemine summons Otillie, Riarda, Angelica, Hartmut, Cornelius, Leonor, and Brunhilde. And to kick it off, she asks if Sylvester's correct about the will of the Lies Gangs, and we find out he sure as shit wasn't. The Lies Gangs aren't the monolith they're being presented as. Specifically, this is the will of the Lies Gang elders. What we get here is confirmation of just how conservative the Lies Gangs are, as they're real big about tradition. They don't really like change that much. Them going up in the ranks so much has led the younger generation diverging from how the older nobles do things, and they're all struggling to keep up as a result. Rosemine's improving health and the new interest around religious ceremonies has only revitalized their desire for her to be Ob over Wilfried. So, did Riarda know this? No, and she's pissed. The fact that their Ob is delivering messages for Gibbs is a goddamn disgrace. Cornelius provides some insight from Lamprecht, that Wilfried was given a list of tasks to complete in order to secure the Lies Gang support for Ob. Lamprecht asks Cornelius for help, but after this meeting, he's not really feeling the urge. Hell, those stage schematics should be enough. But as it turns out, her adult retainers were all approached over winter for information about Rosemine. She wanted to signal she was cool just being the first wife, She needed to take on the duties a first wife would. You know, socializing, not the quote-unquote men's work by spearheading printing and such. Basically, she did stand out too much, but she can't back down now because Ferdinand is gone. Yeah, he normally would have taken care of everything here by setting up a meeting for Sylvester and Rosemine and giving them a plan of attack. But Hartmut points out the Lies Gangs designed this in a way to avoid such a meeting. Kinda sounds like he knew this was coming. And he did. He gets strangely theatrical explaining the plight of the Lies Gangs, and extols their desire to purge Veronica's bloodline from the Archducal family, and stick her at its head since Sylvester just casted out the remainder of his support base. But he's clearly not serious here. Hartmut doesn't buy this shit for one bit, and he finds the Lies Gangs pitiful for trying to drag his lady into something as petty as faction politics. That might seem out of left field somewhat, and people probably attribute that to Hartmut's fanaticism for Rosemine, but a story in the Short Stories collection explains Hartmut's lack of interest in faction politics to begin with. Rosemine gave him purpose, but he always found the internal politics of Ehrenfest dull and pointless. So he says that if it was just Veronica's grandchildren as candidates, the Lies Gangs would have accepted this purge no problem. But Rosemine just being there has again given them hope. They want her to be Ob, and so too does her grandfather. Yeah, Bonifacius doesn't like her visiting the temple still, and because she's so exceptional, he thinks Wilfried should be there instead, since he's already committed a crime. The breakdown of the Lies Gang faction is as follows. Those who want to save her from the temple with Bonifacius and make her Ob if she so wishes, those who despise Veronica's blood so much they want it out of the Archducal family, those who believe in a meritocracy because she's just the best candidate, and those who don't really care so much but just want an Archduke with ties to their family for preferential treatment. Yeah, some pretty varying opinions. So how are they going to make her Ob? Pit her against the rest of the Archducal family, but since they're on such good terms, they had to target Wilfried instead. And as we know, he just so happened to take a big gulp of that poison from Oswald before returning from the Royal Academy. Here's where their trap comes in. Bonifacius was told that she can't speak her mind and he needs to keep an eye on Sylvester, so they can't talk privately, while baiting Sylvester and Wilfried with demands for their support. Hartmut's role in this was to keep an eye internally, while confirming Rosemine's desires. Why didn't he say anything earlier? Well, he needed to observe everyone's movements before coming forward, and thus he proposes this simple answer. Fuck him. Rosemine's influence is so great, she doesn't need the Lies Gangs or their faction politics. Since she only wants books, she doesn't need power, and she's actually the one dishing it out right now through printing. She happened to be spreading that through her Lies Gang family first because, well, it was convenient, but she should focus her efforts beyond Ehrenfest to get the books she desires, because the entire country wants printing. She already has the connections for it too, and after hearing that, her retainers agreed. Veronica's methods were murder and taking credit from others to prop up her family. We're well aware of that. The Lies Gangs have their own tactics though, setting up traps. I mentioned in a previous video how perspective really dictates who's good and evil in this story. And Part 5 really highlights how the Lies Gangs aren't much better than Veronica. They're still horrible, just in a different way. Rosemine doesn't need a faction. Her influence is way too strong for it already. The Lies Gangs assume they can control her as family, but they're mistaken. And for that reason, they start plotting their ultimate solution for controlling the Lies Gangs. The province of Lies Gang prides itself on being the top farming area in Ehrenfest, as we already know, so they don't really care about the greater countrywide politics because it doesn't really impact them. And thus, let them have it. Stroke their ego, and give the Lies Gangs the now empty provinces to focus on farming, and relegate them to backwater areas no one really cares about. The younger generation, however, likes the perks of being a higher ranking duchy, so they can institute a generational shift that'll put more political power in the hands of top performers who will generally be younger, allowing the former Veronica faction a path towards redemption, and those people will be more likely to support the Ob. Rosemine's already been building this in the academy. However, since Rosemine herself isn't aiming for power, she doesn't need the backing of a faction, and thus she proposed the idea to Wilfried to forge it himself. With all that settled, she regroups with Charlotte, who didn't get much from the Lies Gangs in her service, mostly because she doesn't have a ton, but does point out a few flaws in her plan. It's gonna take time, and also the archnobles aren't super pleased with the whole sweat of your own brow mentality Rosemine employs for her mana compression method. But their easiest solution to the immediate problem is Sylvester taking a Lies Gang as his second wife. Oh hey, here's that internal politics strategy Sieglinde proposed last volume coming into play. He can't take one currently, so that's on the back burner for now. In the meantime, she spoke to Wilfried's retainers, who basically had nothing to say besides she should be supporting him more. Weird. While this all happened, Riardo set up a meeting with Sylvester, and Matthias and the others went to help search the estates with the Knight's Order. And a few days later, her meeting with Sylvester actually happens. But Bonifatius joins to fulfill his surveillance role. Now, just because he's working against Rosemine's goals right now, doesn't mean he's actually their enemy, so this is a good chance to get him on their side. She starts by saying she won't be able to spend time with him during the Archduke Conference this year. She's gonna have to go help the royals out. But Bonifatius is always welcome to come have tea with her in the temple, which opens the discussion to that topic. It's been cleaned up, so it's not what he thinks. As for Melchior's transition, he's gonna need a budget and chef. She's thinking of getting a new chef to train under hers and work for Melchior in the temple. That way that chef can transition to the Italian restaurant later. Hell, they're planning on opening a branch in Groschel, so they're gonna need more chefs, period. She also brings up the children in the playroom and her plans to take them on as blue robes. We already know her reasons, but Bonifatius is confused why she would go to such lengths for kids not in her faction. The real reason is pretty simple. They need manpower. These kids can still be useful to Ehrenfest. Well, she's got his permission, but Sylvester asks what the Lies gangs think about all this. Rosemine finally puts an end to this charade. She points out Bonifatius has been keeping an eye on Sylvester, while Sylvester's been doing a bunch of unnecessary crap to appease the Lies gangs. Hell, she even says that Wilfried has been given a similar job, which enrages Sylvester because he didn't know all of his kids got dragged into it. The thing is, Bonifatius didn't either. Now it kinda sounds like Sylvester has an idea of what Wilfried was asked to do, and wants to know if Rosemine warned him about it. But she says that his retainers didn't really share the details. All they want is for her to support him more. So really this clears the air that the Lies gangs are manipulating them all. They need to come together rather than fight. Bonifatius does raise a good point this scene, asking Rosemine why she trusts Sylvester so much. And the answer is pretty easy to understand. Sylvester could have just had her killed or ended her adoption. That would have put an end to this whole mess, but he didn't do either. So why wouldn't she trust him? This does lead into her plan though, creating a generational shift to build a new faction while pushing the less motivated Lies gangs to the fringe. She does bring up Charlotte's issues with her suggestion, and they're pretty valid. Hell, Sylvester has a few to throw in himself. Like, you can't just give the Lies gangs territory, put them on a trial basis and see if they actually have what it takes to be Gibbs. However, to make all this work, he will need a Lies gang as his second wife to stabilize their duchy. But who's gonna be a good fit? Well, Brunhilde steps forward and offers herself up for the role.
Wow, that came out of left field.
Okay, Rosemine's freaking out, and it takes Lieseletta using Ferdinand scolding Schumil to get her to calm down. But once things are back on track, the discussion proceeds. Brunhilde hasn't discussed this with her father, so if Sylvester isn't open to the idea, he can dismiss it quite easily, but he does let her continue. Basically, he needs a wife to stabilize their internal politics for their duchy's sake, and she explains that the current views for the Lies gangs are that the archducal family's position of prioritizing inter-duchy relations right now is dangerous, especially given their recent purge. Basically, they're getting massive Gabrielle flashbacks, and are worried that Rosemine won't marry Wilfried, since marriage is how they traditionally strengthen their bonds with the archducal family. Taking Brunhilde would be a good choice to calm them down, but they are on a time crunch here. Rosemine hasn't noticed, but Sylvester is borrowing Florencia's retainers currently. Yeah, he's let so many go, he doesn't have enough to fill his own staff. But here's why Brunhilde is a good pick. She's still underage, so she won't graduate until next winter, while also having that year engagement. So there's really no need to worry about her mana influencing Florencia's pregnancy. On top of that, her being in the same faction means she can work with Florencia to support her, while not being required to gain a ton of socializing experience because, well, she has it. By hitting the ground running, she can bring about that generational shift that much faster. Well, Rosemine is against this, because she knows that Sylvester won't actually love Brunhilde, but she's in the same situation with Wilfried. Bro loves her like family, not as a woman. And I mean, does she think Sylvester will mistreat her? Well, no, probably not. And that's correct, because like it or not, she is Guy Groschel's daughter, so it's her official stance that she's against this. Brunhilde begs her to allow it, saying she wants to support her by making a power base for Rosemine when she becomes the first wife. Okay, she has to admit it, this is the best option for Ehrenfest, but damn, it's gonna hurt losing her as a retainer. Good thing Brunhilde wants to keep serving her until she comes of age then. Okay, so everyone's in agreement. But there's one massive shadow hanging over this conversation. Brunhilde is supposed to be the next Guy Groschel, isn't she? Well, about that, her father's second wife had a son over winter, It's not official yet, but there was a very likely discussion where her father told her she wasn't going to be his successor anymore. So this is her way of maintaining some use for her family. And hey, she can also use this influence to help smooth over the Ob helping out in Groshel's renovations, because her dad's probably still going to feel disrespected even with this current framing. Instead, it'll turn into special treatment. That's a great public answer, but we'll find out that Brunhilde's personal reasons are a bit more petty in a side story later this volume. Okay, she's won Sylvester over. He'll request a meeting with her father to discuss it officially, but just as they're gonna wrap this up, an ordinance arrives for Karstedt from the Knight's Order. Turns out Matthias has a reason to suspect that his father is still alive. Bonifatius takes charge in this investigation from there, while Sylvester has Karstedt stay by his side. That pretty much brings the meeting to a close, so it's just Rosamund and her retainers left. She asks Brunhilde if she needs any help with her outfit, but honestly, they can't really make things look too bland. As for the engagement face stone, she has quite the selection to choose from, considering their exploits in the academy for the past few years. She'll likely receive an urgent summons from her father pretty soon. But there's still even more drastic changes hitting, as Riarda requests to return to Sylvester's side, since he's so short on retainers. That's like a kick in the ass. But she explains that with Brunhilde leaving, someone will need to work with Florencia and Sylvester that they can trust. It'll also make sure Brunhilde feels comfortable with a familiar face. Yeah, this sounds kinda harsh, but Rosamund's bound for the temple at the end of the winter feast, and she and Charlotte have the most stable retainer base right now. Gresha is almost up to speed, while Bertilda will be in the academy starting next year. So, really, their absence won't be noticed. Rosamund gives her a very heartfelt farewell and asks her to go help Sylvester. And after a short while after she's gone, Sylvester tried to refuse, but ultimately has to accept. Probably after Riarda scolded him first, but that's it. Rosamund's no longer losing her childhood comfort, she's actively shedding it for other people's sake. Again, I just want to highlight, this shows her personal growth. Things move pretty quickly after that, where Brunhilde gets a summons from her father, while Cornelius and Lamprecht were summoned by Elvira for questioning. Rosamund can't really leave, so she just decides to read and transcribe the books that were lent to her, and the first one is from Hannelore. Some of its stories about the subordinate gods not found in the Bible are actually still alive and well through the oral traditions of commoners. The one that stands out is about Flurane bathing with her subordinates to share her power to wash away a Weegalip. The Leidenschaft subordinates try to catch a peek and were held back by some fey plants growing to stop them. Yeah, that kinda sounds like the goddess's bath incident. She also sets up some of the groundwork to get Freitag returned to the temple. And 2 days after Brunhilde was summoned away, they have a family dinner in the main building. So it's pretty obvious what the topic is, but the other kids don't know yet. So Sylvester makes the announcement that he'll be taking Brunhilde as his second wife after getting permission from all the relevant parties. It's going to be announced at the upcoming feast, and should help them compromise with the Lies gangs. Wilfried isn't super pleased to be hearing this, as he's actually swallowing some harsh words. And Charlotte's just merely in shock hearing it, period. But Brunhilde was literally the only person for this job, between her age, skills, and connections. So this was great timing for once. But the main person whose reaction matters is Florencia, and it turns out she's welcoming Brunhilde into the family with open arms, which in turn put Charlotte somewhat at ease. At the feast, her namesworn are finally back from their investigations, so the official announcement over the new Giebs can be made. So when time comes to enter the hall, Rosamund notices a few things. Brunhilde is the center of the Lies gangs right now, with them all flocking to her, but also a decent number of the criminals have already returned from their punishments. Doesn't really look like the noble population has changed much, right? Wrong. Wilfried tells her that she's been insulated from it. And in the corner is Oswald. Dude was finally let go, and fuck him. So she tries to cheer him up, saying that after the generational shift is over, perhaps Wilfried could bring his dismissed retainers back. But that's for Wilfried to do though, because she's trying to keep her head down. Wilfried, being such an easy character to read, isn't giving much emotion here for a reason. He's mostly just keeping his thoughts to himself around Rosamund, but a side story does go into a lot more detail. It really comes to a head in Volume 6. So the announcements kick off with the usual stuff, Royal Academy updates, but their research made a huge splash. Ehrenfest is at the forefront of all this religious crap, and they want to maintain that, obviously. So Sylvester announces that Melchior will take over the temple when Rosamund comes of age, actually making it clear that his blood children are involved too. And in the meantime, he's going to be working as a blue robe to train. From there, they talk about the results of the purge, how nobles who committed smaller crimes should work to redeem themselves, how the new Lies gangs appointed as Giebs in the south are to oppose Arnsbach, specifically how they'll be on a 3-year trial period as discussed in Rosamund's meeting with Sylvester and Bonifatius, and how he'll be heading up Groshel's renovation, which leads him into saying the younger generation will be working in the castle more, and to facilitate that, he's taking Brunhilde as his second wife. He calls her up onto the stage and they exchange engagement face stones. Sylvester then compares her to Flute Rane to heal their broken duchy, and Brunhilde accepts her role. Ottilie, who has taken over Riarda's place as Rosemine's head attendant, had explained before that only the first wife is to be compared to the goddess of light publicly. Second and third wives are usually compared to subordinates. So Sylvester choosing Flute Rane here really cements the role she'll be taking on. When she accepts, Rosamine fires off a massive blessing, and that's a bit embarrassing, but also to be expected. That's a little detail that doesn't get a ton of attention, I mean, just a passing mention, but it demonstrates to the noble population at large that she's supporting this engagement. Now that the feast is done and the nobles are heading home, Rosamine can leave the northern building finally. Their first stop is to take Melchior and the Playroom children over to the temple and show them around so they can make a decision if they're gonna stay. But Hartmut gathers them in the High Priest chamber so she can get changed, and that way she can hear from her temple attendants. It's been a while. While getting changed though, she has them summon the merchants for 3 days out. But the Gilberta company's gonna have a ton of work to do, because not many of her clothes still fit. Yeah, she's definitely growing taller. She then heads to the High Priest chamber where all the kids are having Peru cakes as a snack. The temple attendants are getting passing marks from the nobles, and here's where Hartmut explains that he's passing Lothar off to Melchior to help him learn in the temple. As for the rest of his temple staff, they'll need picked from the orphanage. The rest of the kids will get to choose too. Pretty exciting. But as they eat and chat, Nikolaus speaks up to get Rosemine's attention. Cornelius gives her a look, but they've already confirmed through Shutsaria's shield that he doesn't hold a grudge against her, and he really just wants to ask if she views him as her little brother. And she explains that she does, but she can't really show him favoritism because she's adopted by the Ob. Hell, she can't even treat Lamprecht and Cornelius as her brothers in public, and that makes him somewhat relieved, because he assumed that she hated him due to his mother. So it's worth pointing out who Nikolaus idolizes. He's a big fan of Bonifacius, but not in the same way that Traugott is. He wants to take after not just his father, but even his brothers too, because there's a long tradition of proud knights in this family. He has no problem serving an Archduke candidate, but the person he wants to serve is his amazing big sister. So just like, imagine if Traugott wasn't a garbage person, that's pretty much Nikolaus. After a quick tour of the rooms and who'll stay where, with Nikolaus getting the furthest archnoble room from hers due to his mother. But while they're there getting an education, he's curious if they can still train since he wants to be a knight. And I mean, her guards will be there to help with that. But I don't know, maybe they can schedule for the kids to go to the training grounds too? Cornelius tells Nikolaus that he doesn't really think he should be in the temple though, because his mother's gonna complain, and I mean he would rather just not hear it. But the kid says she bothers him as much as them. Yeah, he finds her annoying too. So I guess it comes down to Rosamine, and if he wants to be in the temple, let him. Well, we can see where this is going. He'll likely end up as her temporary retainer like Theodore. After they head to the orphanage to get attendance sorted, there are a lot of new gray robes aside from the pre-baptism children. Yeah, the blue robes who were taken by the Knights Order had their attendance put in the orphanage. So Hartmut gets them in order and has Melchior and the other kids pick attendance based on status, with a focus on who can actually guide these kids in the temple. He's ruthlessly efficient and clearly knows the skills of each gray robe. But while that happens, she speaks with the pre-baptism kids to let them know what's been decided. In autumn, Sylvester will stop by and judge those who are about to be baptized to see if they're fit to be nobles. If they work hard, they'll be baptized with him as their guardian. Now note, they won't be Archduke candidates because this isn't an adoption. After that, she lets Felina and Lorenz speak to their little brothers. However, the orphanage is pretty surprising to the rest of her new retainers. But Bertram's skeptical that anything in the orphanage will actually help him out later in life, as he's just going to the forest and doing a bunch of cleaning. What the hell? Rosamine explains just how useful this stuff can be. They're gonna need nobles who can speak with commoners for printing, especially those who want to be scholars. Right? They can build relationships with merchants who visit. She then shows them a special trick she only learned because of her time in the temple, and explodes her high beast face stone only to roll it back together like clay. They can find an endless amount of inspiration here if they pay attention. That'll help when they have to visualize stuff later on. So with that, she's convinced the kids to try their best, study hard, and become nobles. Most magic in Part 3 feels very ad hoc. With her constantly destroying expectations, there might as well be no rules. And that's only because it's so heavily based on visualization, and she doesn't have a noble's upbringing holding her back. It's here in Part 5 we finally get that way back in Volume 8 of this story, she didn't destroy her high beast face stone, she just imagined it exploding. That was how she was able to reform it. It's a completely different process than making gold dust. So as they call it, Hartmut guides the orphanage in prayer where he lets fly the modified version with Rosemine in it. Yeah, that's creepy as hell, and she wants to say something about it, but it's way too embarrassing to actually bring up in front of all these people. After that, she heads back to the castle and gives Sylvester an update over dinner. The temple will be fine in the long run, but there is still a problem. Spring prayer is going to be a nightmare with so few blue priests. Melchior had no practice with using his mana because Ferdinand couldn't really teach him over autumn and stuff. And also, remember, Ferdinand's gone. So there's just one less Archduke candidate to shoulder the burden. What can they even do? Wilfried steps up with a great idea. Or so he thinks. Let him and Charlotte handle the Giebs, while she handles the Central District. That'll help publicize his involvement in the temple more. He needs that, right? This can only go poorly, because he's planning to tackle the southern provinces ruled by lies gangs. Well, part of making that a success is proving one can obtain divine protections in adulthood, so Wilfried asks if she can move up the ritual. That might get his retainers to relax a bit, because they're really against him venturing out on spring prayer. Probably because they lack the manpower to actually protect his ass right now, but that's not a major problem. In fact, she could probably help out by making protective charms for him and Charlotte to keep them safe. Alright, so spring prayer is settled. She'll handle the Central District in Kernberger, since the Gutenbergs are heading over there next anyway, per their agreement in taking Theodore as a temporary guard. Sylvester mentions that Ferdinand is looking for some luggage and his engagement gifts to be sent over, and considering Rosemine has his estate, sending it pretty much falls to her. And as it turns out, things are pretty rough for him having to do Arnsbach's spring prayer with Letizia. Now this is absolutely unheard of and pretty absurd. And Letizia is even being asked to supply the foundation too, despite her lack of practice. Because they heard that those in Ehrenfest supply mana after their baptism. Sounds like they misunderstood Ehrenfest rituals then. But that does make Sylvester guess that Ob Arnsbach has probably passed away. But is Georgine really gonna go along with this? What the hell is she thinking? Sylvester informed Ferdinand about the former Guy Gerlach, so we'll see if he turns up anything on his end. And after dinner, she reads the letter she got from him in her hidden room, and it details quite a bit in hidden ink. He already has the magic circle for the Divine Protections ritual drawn up in his workshop in her library, and he wants her to send over the results of her research with it, which is fine. She was probably going to show him anyway. So when she exits her hidden room, she says they'll be stopping by the library, and also to inform Brunhilde about the merchants coming in a few days because that discussion's going to pertain to Groschel quite a bit, and then she'll be back in the temple. So the next day she strolls on over to the library, but there's a laundry list of things she has to do before she can even read. She brought the praise-filled magic tool so she can finally get her very good, but Lasfam tells her that quite a few of the items on Ferdinand's list are locked in rooms that require her to open, since she has the key to the estate, so she has to go around and do that before she can even read. That sucks. Then she has to open up Ferdinand's workshop so Hartmut can look for the magic circle they need for the ritual. And then after all of that, she can finally go up to the third floor with Angelica to create a hidden room. That way she can listen to the magic tool. It seems a bit weird that the third floor is always where women's chambers are at, but that just kinda seems to be the way this world works. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, I guess. But the room in question still has furniture in it from a woman before. That's weird. Wasn't Ferdinand a bachelor? This was actually the room of the woman who accompanied Ferdinand to Ehrenfest before he was baptized. This was the closest person he had to a mother in his life. When he moved to the castle to prepare for his baptism, she vanished, probably killed by Veronica. So who was this woman? We'll find out in about 4 volumes, but know this. If she hadn't been killed, Ehrenfest would be a completely different place. So Rosemine makes her new hidden room and gives the tool a listen. Ferdinand's voice comes through and tells her that something happened over winter, because it's very likely the survivors of the Purge fled to Georgine, and Sylvester must not lower his guard at any cost. There's also boxes of documents to control the lies gangs in Ferdinand's estate. Yeah, he already foresaw this coming, but Sylvester needs to learn to do this on his own. So unless things really get bad, don't use them. Then he gives her a warning. The merchants will likely be targeted by upper-ranked duchies again this year, and Ferdinand's usually been handling that behind the scenes. But now she's gonna have to because he's not there. So he teaches her how to make a protective charm that even commoners can use. Yeah, those actually exist. So yeah, this magic tool was basically filled with warnings and instructions, but just as she was giving up hope on getting some actual praise, the much anticipated very good finally comes through. Now she's pumped. So she heads out to hit up the workshop to snag the ingredients she'll need for Charlotte, Wilfried, Melchior, and all of her commoner friends and family's protective charms. That's a lot of brewing. They've got everything ready for the ritual, but Leonore, Lisa, Letta, and Judith are going to be sitting it out. The first two just repeated the ritual, so doing it again so soon probably won't help them. Judith, on the other hand, just hasn't prayed enough yet, so she'll do it at a later date. She offers Otillie and Brunhilde a chance, but they decline as well, since they're pretty busy. Also, Brunhilde's getting a second chance at the end of the term next year, so not really much point in doing it now, right? Now all of her new namesworn have to participate to confirm Roderick's theory, but she fires off an ordnance to Elvira to see if she's coming too. If so, she can hand over Muriella and actually confirm that elements are influenced by name-swearing. And hey, as it turns out, Elvira is free in the afternoon. And the next day, they head to the chapel where Angelica does it first to see if they can cut down on the prayer by only praying to specific gods. She is messing with the status order quite a bit here, because Hartmut's next when Cornelius should be, but she explains that he has work to do as the high priest, and Cornelius accepts that reasoning but tells her to be careful down the line. Not everybody's gonna be okay with her shirking status. Now Rosemine's not gonna watch every single ritual, just Angelica's to make sure she does it right. And the first attempt fails miserably, because she only tried to pray to two gods. Okay, so turns out you can't shorten the prayer, but what if you repeat after someone? Stenluke has it memorized, of course, so she repeats after him, and that actually works. So Angelica actually gets protections now, from Leidenschaft, Schutzaria, Stiefebriza, and Angrief, and she's absolutely pumped to go test this out with Bonifatius. After that, Hartmut does his, but Rosemine returns to her workshop to continue crafting protective charms, and after a while, Hartmut shows up. He comments on the charm she's made, and even hints that he may want one because he's doing Spring Prayer too, and she says she'll be happy to make him one, if he stops leading the kids in that modified prayer. As it turns out, that's a bit of a hard sell, since he's using it to instill gratitude for the Archducal family in the former Veronica faction children. But just as she's starting to get swept away in Hartmut's bullshit, Gresha centers her by reaffirming the modified prayer won't do them any good, even if teaching them to respect the Archducal family is an admirable goal. Once again, we're met with Gresha's role as an attendant. The more we see from her from this point on, and yes, she will be forced to take a more active role, we find that she's one of Rosemine's most dedicated and observant retainers. She's underrated. So after making Hartmut give up on the modified prayer, she gives him a sound blocking magic tool and writes down what protections he got. He got protections from 5 new subordinate gods, and this is where we get a lot more names of gods and roles that I'm not going to bother pronouncing, but the key takeaway is Hartmut got protections from 2 life subordinates, giving him that new element, the god of longevity and the god of dreams. Life is a particularly rare element to have, so it's pretty slick to get it. Too bad he didn't best Wilfried though, that was his goal. Then again, it hasn't even been a year since he's been doing religious ceremonies, so he's still got time, and this sort of scene plays out for pretty much everyone else. Cornelius picked up the same protections as Leonore, but with the added bonus of Erdrias, the god of deliverance, giving him the darkness element. That god is associated with dispelling the goddess of chaos. That turns into a bit of a running theme this section, but it's all people who worked hard to thwart plots, so it makes sense. Matthias is omni-elemental now, confirming Roderick's theory, but apparently he had 3 elements at his baptism. That's neat, considering the vast majority of med nobles only have 2, but his grandmother was also Gabrielle's retainer who married down in status. She influenced his family's mana quite a bit. He picked up Angrief and Verdrios as well for subordinates, but when they go to have a break for lunch, Lorenz just finished his ritual, so in the afternoon it'll be Muriella and Gresha. But just as they sit, an ordinance from Leonore comes in saying Bonifatius plans to join Elvira for her visit this afternoon. Oh damn, suddenly it's all hands on deck for the temple. She needs to change his view of this place or else. So after lunch, Lorenz, Felina, and Rosemine head into her workshop so she can hear the details on his ritual. It's here that Rosemine points out that Lorenz's flirty attitude makes Gresha super uncomfortable. She's not great with men to begin with, but Lorenz is just that little bit extra annoying for her. However, he does at least make the effort to say he'll be careful in the future. He reports that he's omni-elemental now, along with the same subordinates as Matthias. After he leaves, Muriella comes in and says she got the goddess of sprouts like her bestie, on top of being omni-elemental. Great for her. But Rosemine explains she'll have to redo the ritual once Elvira is there. But before Gresha gets back, Bonifatius and Elvira arrive. He looks around the temple while they have some tea and says that it's not as bad of a place as he assumed. But she does take the chance to ask him, since he's here and all, would he consider dropping by to train the kids interested in being knights at the temple? That seems a bit out there, these are kids of the former Veronica faction. But Rosemine hits back, they're going to be name-sworn retainers in the future, so they might as well get a head start on their training. right? Besides, Nikolaos is there and he wants to be a knight like the rest of the boys in his family. Bonifatius finally says he'll consider it, which is good enough for her. So I do want to point out it's kind of interesting how casually she's talking to Bonifatius about name swearing here. Now he's not saying anything here, but you will notice, he's not just nodding along with her whole trust assumption. This is explained in a later book, but there are reservations. Okay, so what brought him there? Turns out Angelica was a bit stronger. I mean, he won still, but he could tell she improved after the ritual. Well, that sounds great. So would he and Elvira like to try too? Well, no. They have to decline, and Elvira explains that it's been decades since they've needed to use that prayer, so they can't really remember all of the gods' names at this point. Even Elvira struggles to recall the ones she doesn't use in her books, so it'll take some study time before she can even give it a shot. But Bonifatius is still interested in seeing it, and thus she throws Daniel under the bus for Bonifatius to go watch. As for Elvira, Sylvester gave her permission to hand over Muriella for the sake of this research, but in return, he wants to do the ritual as soon as possible. Well damn, so Rosemind passes off Muriella quickly to avoid pain, and then has her redo the ritual, so we get a summary on the results. Muriella proved that name swearing doesn't carry over elements, so she actually lost her omni-elemental status after swearing to Elvira. Gresha got the Goddess of Concealment, while Damiel got the most Damiel protections he could. Yeah, it turns out he actually picked up the light element from the Goddess of Binding, but he also got 2 subordinates from Wind, which was an element he already had, protections from the Goddess of Time and the Goddess of Separation. Bro's never getting married at this rate. Sorry, Felina. Time for her meeting with the lower city merchants. But before she can head there, Hartmut has a pretty urgent piece of business. Because he entered the temple, he can't exactly marry Clarissa yet, because priests can't get married. However, she refused to wait until Rosemind came of age to come to Ehrenfest. That means she demanded to be brought over right away as a bride-to-be. But that was supposed to be during the Archduke Conference. We know Clarissa by now though, and yeah, she wasn't gonna wait. After a careless remark from Ob Dunkelfelger, she left for their border gate with Frembeltag without so much as a warning, and is heading for Ehrenfest right now. Seems extreme, especially since she doesn't even have any luggage or permission. Dunkelfelger is in an absolute state because they're causing problems for Ehrenfest again, and her parents are trying to catch up to her. But Hartmut assumes that she'll arrive in a few days, and he and his parents will go to the border gate to pick her up and give her a scolding for causing problems. This is gonna delay spring prayer, so it's a pain in the ass. With that update on her mind, she heads to her meeting before Melchior and Brunhilde arrive. There she passes out her charms to protect her commoner associates, explains their purpose and how they're not as powerful as the ones that nobles would use, but they do pack a punch if attacked with a decent amount of force. She then explains the new children in the orphanage, that she's hoping to train as scholars who can communicate with the lower city after she comes of age. After that, Melchior, Brunhilde, and their scholars arrive. This is a crash course on dealing with merchants for Melchior, and for Brunhilde to iron out Groschel's situation. They explain their timetable, which is a relief to the merchants, but also how they're planning to tackle the training and furnishings over autumn and winter. That way they'll be ready to have Groschel patch 2.0 ready to launch next summer. This is going to involve a lot of merchants getting branch stores, so they want them to convey what they want for the scholars. This is a pretty rare chance, since the lower city buildings were created some 200 years ago, and they've had to be worked around or modified. So we see how far Brunhilde has come along in this scene. She's speaking with commoners plainly rather than just ordering them around. A complete 180 from 2 years ago with that whole Groschel disaster. Next is Taka Kernberger with Lutz. He says that pretty much all the Gutenbergs want to send their disciples this time instead of going themselves for various reasons. Heidi is pregnant, fucking terrifying. Zach is preparing for his starbind, while Johann and Inga want to send their disciples to gain some experience. Which is great, because that means Zach can actually help out with Groschel to speed it up. But the planting company wants to bring some promising unbaptized kids to the orphanage and check out their workshop before they sign up as apprentices. Lutz slides over a list and sure enough, Camille is on it. Goddamn, now she's super pumped. But remember, unbaptized kids can't even enter the temple. Yeah, she'll have to ask around if it's cool first. But before Rosemind can fire off a massive blessing over getting to see her little brother up close, Ordnance flies in for Hartmut. Turns out Clarissa isn't just in Ehrenfest, because Ordnances can't fly over duchy borders, but is actually at the west gate to the city, and can't get in because foreign nobles still require permits from the Archduke. So Rosemind handles this by responding instead, telling her to stay put and listen to the guards, or else she'll be sent back home to Dunkelfelger. And with that, Hartmut heads out to go get a permit from Sylvester, and also talk with his parents to figure out what the hell they're gonna do. Daniel and Angelica head on over to the gate to mediate, while she tries to move this meeting along. Everyone's apprehensive at that, even the scholars, but they're all gonna be insanely busy starting soon, so they can't exactly go and reschedule this on a whim. I mean, it's pretty much better they just finish this off while sitting there waiting for a permit, right? So they move on to some more detailed business stuff, and end with informing Benno that they've been told that Ehrenfest no longer wishes to climb the duchy ranks, per the Lies gangs. So he's got permission to sell the educational stuff they've been keeping a secret to the other duchies now. It's easier to bring up the whole country rather than dumb themselves down. So, Benno's about to make a killing. They wrap up the meeting, and Rosemine meets with Hartmut and his parents to go pick up Clarissa after getting permission from Sylvester. This turned out to not just be a hell of a mess, but an ungodly breakdown in communication. Clarissa showed up at the border gate with Frembeltag and old Workstock, with a travel permit from Ob Dunkelfelger, and a single guard knight. That's unheard of, since archnobles would normally have an entire procession of carriages carrying gifts and luggage, you know, along with their parents, but Clarissa didn't have any of that. Yeah, it was shady as hell, and after the guards confirmed with Dunkelfelger's castle that she did in fact have permission to marry into Ehrenfest, the scholar responding failed to mention that her parents are currently racing to try and catch her. She then got into Frembeltag and sprinted headlong for the gate to Ehrenfest, and got a similar reaction there. They contacted Ehrenfest Castle, and their scholars were aware she was on the way. Already, they'd heard about it in a ton of meetings. But they failed to mention, yet again, that her parents are trying to stop her so they can catch up. So the border guards assumed that the Obs were in contact with one another, and that this just looked really suspect on the surface. She literally ran into 0 speed bumps on her little trip, until she got to the city gate where the commoners were the only ones who actually questioned this shit.
You couldn't make this up even if you tried. Noble culture is such a clusterfuck of communication where nobody wants to be held responsible, they would rather just not say anything at all. Also love that callback to part 2 with that whole permission slip thing.
So Hartmut's father, Lieberman, explains they'll scold her for the trouble she's caused and fire off a formal complaint to Dunkelfelger, but to keep this from being embarrassing as hell to 3 different duchies while also not ruining her reputation in Ehrenfest, they'll play this off as just a passionate display of romance rather than a Rosemine-inspired rampage. And to add insult to Lieberman's pain, Rosemine asks him to train Clarissa and Felina to help out in the castle. That'll keep her in check, while Rosemine gets reports from her in the library every few days. That way she's still serving her, but obviously they can't send her to the temple, despite how badly Clarissa would actually want that, because that would just be an absolute insult to Dunkelfelger and her parents. So Rosemine shows up at the city gate and finds Gunther there staring Clarissa down, looking forward to that little side story, and passes off some money and well-deserved praise for their efforts. Apparently the soldiers thought they were massively screwing up, but they were actually following orders perfectly. That's when she drags Clarissa to her library for a good old-fashioned Ferdinand-inspired scolding. Talk about the perfect place for one. Why did Clarissa come early? Because she overheard Ob Dunkelfelger saying an early arrival would actually help Ehrenfest out. So she was originally going to come during the Archduke conference, but said screw that, and decided to inconvenience everyone. So Rosemine explains all the crap her spur-of-the-moment rampage screwed up, including spring prayer, a massive meeting with the merchants, and now Hartmut's parents need to figure out how the hell they're gonna house her. Yeah, the Obs actually had to use their emergency method of contact to coordinate this too. Okay, she gets it. She screwed up. They explain that she'll work in the castle under Lieberman, but she of course tries to worm her way into the temple. They explain how bad that would look, and she doesn't really seem to get it, until it's framed that no one would actually care about the fact that she wanted to go. Rosemine experienced that firsthand in the academy. Guess she'll have to just settle for working for Rosemine in the castle. So with that, Clarissa is officially in Ehrenfest, and no one knows when the hell her luggage is actually going to arrive.
It's almost anticlimactic how Clarissa arrived in Ehrenfest, but it's also entirely on brand for her, through sheer force of will and eyes only on the prize. Also, I want to point out, this is Lieberman's first real appearance in the mainline story. He appeared in Sylvester's side story 2 books back, but this is Rosemine's first real introduction to him, despite her seeing him with Florencia.
Now, before they can go to spring prayer, Rosemine needs to order some clothes, so the Gilberta company is brought in for her measurements. They're doing this in the temple to save time and not inconvenience a bunch of people, but F is coming along too to coordinate the outfits and dyes. Or at least that's the excuse. Really, it's so Rosemine can give her charms for herself and Camille. But Hartmut happens to be in her chambers before they arrive, and she decides now is a good time to ask him if they can let the pre-baptism kids in with the planting company. And he says that's not a great idea, which is weird he actually shot down an idea of hers, but says it would open up those pre-baptism kids to noble exploitation. With all those who are going to be visiting from now on, yeah, it's dangerous. Fran and Zam are relieved to hear him push back,
but picking up on her sadness over having to turn down Camille's request, Hartmut mentions it would probably be safe before spring prayer. Now she's tempted, but she does fight back the urge to approve it. This would be pushing the line with the lower city that Ferdinand drew for her, because ultimately, it is safer. That's when Hartmut mentions just how much of a shame it is she didn't follow through.
He's been dropping so many hints about how much he knows, but he's damn good at keeping the true meaning hidden. So I'm sure everyone's dying to know how much Hartmut knows about Rosemind's past, but rest assured, you'll get that answer in 2 more volumes.
It's finally time for spring prayer, and their first stop is Haas, where Melchior is observing. This is to get him some experience about what needs done, while teaching him about their unique relationship with the city. Now, this is pretty hard fought since no one really wanted him to go, but since it's so close, he can just leave with one of his retainers by Highbeast and get back to Ehrenfest quite easily, so it's a pretty nice stepping stone for him. Now, he does lack ceremonial robes, so he's actually going to be wearing mines from her apprentice days. That's pretty funny. Freitag was also returned to the temple around this time too, and without his family's backing, Rosemind's paying him for transcriptions, while he's also throwing himself into his temple work for cash. And we also get an update on how Clarissa is fitting in at the castle. She's impressing the scholars quite a bit with her eye for detail and preparing for the Archduke conference, while also keeping up with Riarda for info from Sylvester. And through that grapevine, we learn that he and Wilfried are having some regular shouting matches lately. Yeah, apparently he's pissed about something. We'll find out more about that later. Haas's ceremony goes normally, in massive air quotes. She introduces Melchior, his future role as the next High Bishop, to Richt, and she also didn't bother bringing a large chalice this year. Bold choice, because that worries the commoners. That is until she creates it from her shop and performs the ritual flawlessly. Melchior's feeling like he's got some big shoes to fill now, but she explains that he won't be able to make a chalice until he's got his own shop. So he won't have to do that next year. At the monastery, it throws the nobles off that everyone is eating at the same time, but Rosemind explains there is actually a purpose for it. This is to gather useful information. So she shows Melchior how to talk to soldiers and hear what they have to say about the lower city. She introduces him as the next High Bishop to Gunther, and they all hear how much Damiel helped out the soldiers during the purge. The lower city was already on high alert, and Gunther had overseen the North Gate, so he was ground zero for stopping any fleeing nobles. Damiel was the quickest to arrive when carriages tried to barge through, because he just so happened to be stationed at the temple, so they view him pretty highly, aside from him rushing to their aid with that whole Clarissa incident. After spring prayer is over, she meets up with the Gutenbergs before they depart for Kernberger. We get officially introduced to their disciples here who will handle their work, presumably after they pass away, since commoners don't live nearly as long as nobles. Ingo has Demo, a guy who has been working on printing presses since the first one back in part 2, so he's pretty familiar working between fields. Horace is stepping in for Heidi. He's competent and not ink-obsessed like her. Zach introduces us to Seed, who's not as skilled as Danilo, but will be a good mediator to help Johann communicate. And hey, speaking of, we're finally introduced to Danilo himself. Yeah, the gang's all here. Judith has also made sure that Kernberger was all set up for them by passing along where Lie's gang and Groschel stumbled, so they can officially head off to Kernberger.
So we're finally making our way to Judith's birthplace, Kernberger. I brought this up in my Royal Academy Stories video, but for those who didn't see it, it's worth bringing up here. In Part 4, Volume 1, I made the mistake of calling Judith Gieb Kernberger's daughter. She's not. First off, she's a med noble, and Gieb Kernberger's an arch noble. But really, she's just passionate about her home province, and we're gonna see why here in a second. There's a reason why Kernberger has been on the horizon of this story for a while, and the author waited until Part 5 to show us, because this little trip gives us a complete picture of Ehrenfest's place within the entire country.
So when they arrive, they meet Gieb Kernberger face to face. Turns out he's a big supporter of Bonifatius, and his father was firmly in the camp that Bonifatius should have been the Archduke over Sylvester's dad. But does that mean that he's a Lies Gang affiliated noble? Well, no. Kernberger is actually a neutral province who doesn't really care that much about faction politics, mostly because of their unique perspective. The Gieb thinks it's best to let the Gutenbergs settle in the lower city before they talk about printing, and that's a great idea. So they immediately head to the lower city, where we notice a pretty strange quirk about it. Gieb summer mansions are usually located at the back of their cities, but Kernberger is backwards for some reason. The Gieb's estate is the first thing you see when you arrive, but that's also not entirely true. As it turns out, we're looking at it from the wrong direction, because Kernberger's city is facing its country gate, not Ehrenfest. Also, despite its massive size, there's very few commoners and plenty of open buildings. They even joke that if the Gutenbergs don't like their accommodations, they can just let him know so he can get them moved. They have a ton of open space. So, why is that? The Gieb elaborates that before Ehrenfest was a thing, the old Greater Duchy of Eisenreich stood in its place. Kernberger used to be flooded with international trade, so it used to be a major hub, but a king from long ago shut the country gate, and it hasn't been open since. Now all of the other country gates are closed too, except for Arnsbach, but that's because the Grutricite is missing. This one has a special reason why it's not open. Now Rosemine actually recognizes that duchy's name, but it barely gets a passing mention in Ehrenfest's history, so she doesn't really know a ton about it. I guess that means this gate has been closed for 200 some years. Pretty exciting. So she wants to hear the story about it and see the country gate for herself. But that's gonna have to wait until their meeting is over.
Not because the Gieb is dismissive, but because he's actually excited to show Rosemine. With his support of Bonifatius, her lineage, and the chaos within the duchy, there's a lot that Gieb Kernberger wants to verify about Rosemine for himself.
Things fly by pretty quick, as she gives over the chalices, and the negotiations are done in the blink of an eye. That's when they take off for the country gate itself. They petition Sylvester in anticipation of this to open the border gate beforehand. Now understand, every country gate has a duchy border gate in front of it, so entry into the country actually requires the Zent and Ob's permission. Usually it's closed, but we can see through it to the country gate now, which is a pretty rare sight. Even in Kernberger, it takes knights with high beasts to venture to the top for a glimpse. And unlike the duchy borders, which are invisible, the country gate is a massive iridescent wall carved out into a perfect circle going around the whole country. And at the gate itself, it has a complex pattern on it similar to Schwartz and Weiss, showing off just how skilled old royals are. So she follows the Gieb up to the top after hearing Judith gush about how pretty the country gate is, and we get our first glimpse of what lies just beyond Jürgenschmidt. There's not another country, but instead a white desert, exactly what land looks like without mana. So did the country that used to be there run out of mana and wither away? Well, no. Because country gates are actually massive teleportation circles, the king has to come and open every single year. Now that sounds like a massive chore to go traveling around, but the Grutricite actually allows him to teleport between each gate. It used to be a massive celebration when the Zent came to open the country gate, but this is a really old story now.
Okay, so the Grutricite allows the king to make teleportation circles within the entire country, redraw duchy borders, move their foundations, and open country gates. So we're starting to get the full picture on what it means to rule Jürgenschmidt without one now.
So Rosemine finally asks, why was Eisenreich's country gate closed all those years ago? We're getting into the really deep lore now, so go ahead and grab your notebooks. They traded with a country called Bosgeis, which was probably pretty damn important. Arnsbach's rank is being maintained purely because they have the only open country gate right now. And true, it was important. Eisenreich contained most of modern Fremdeltag and territory north of Holdensel with a massive iron mine. That was their main export. However, pretty much every country wants only one thing out of Jürgenschmidt, face stones. Because as it turns out, they apparently don't exist anywhere else. Or at least they're rare. Even the low quality ones that commoners can get are expensive. And that started their downfall, because Bosgeis convinced Ob Eisenreich to become Zent himself. Now, this isn't like overthrowing the current king who's pretty contentious, but an actual true ruler with a Grutricite. As it turns out, this was actually possible for Eisenreich at the time. They had the power to do so, but his daughter was apparently engaged to a prince, so she went to the sovereignty alone and informed the king about what her father was planning. The Zent was absolutely pissed at that. He immediately closed the country gate and then had the Sovereign Knights Order attack the Eisenreich dorm to kill all the knights they were moving there to attack the sovereignty. The Ob was then killed, and his entire family was executed for guilt by association. Well, except for his one daughter who warned the Zent. But she didn't get a happy ending out of it. The Zent made her the next Ob Eisenreich after cutting their territory down to that of a middle duchy. This created Fremdeltag, and Klausenberg was given the ore-rich mine up to the north. Her engagement to his son was cancelled, and she was given a new husband fit for a middle duchy. Eisenreich got such a bad reputation as traders, while the poorer Bosgeis citizens were stuck there, eventually becoming wandering merchants since they couldn't afford citizenship. When it became time for a new Ob to take over because she was getting older, the family was split between begging the king to reopen the country gate and reclaim their former glory, and those who were fine just riding out their punishment. It got so bad, an actual war split the duchy apart. That's when Ob Eisenreich turned to the king again. She basically washed her hands of the situation, and the king answered by bringing the Sovereign Knights Order to crush the nobles who wanted to reopen the country gate. And with him, he brought the very first of the Ehrenfest line. The Foundation's location was changed, and so was the duchy's name, creating Ehrenfest as we know it.
If you'll recall way back in part 2, Gustav and Frida tell the story of how Ehrenfest Lower City was created, that when the current family took over after a war, they expanded the capital as a show of power. Mine was probably told a similar story at some point, but this still doesn't match her education after she was baptized as a noble. This isn't the story she's familiar with, and that's true, but it's also a matter of perspective. The first Ob Ehrenfest came with the Sovereign Knights Order and they did take over the Foundation in a war, but it does give a different impression. Commoners wouldn't know the full story, and history is written by the victors. The thing is, Rosemine has gathered stories from commoners and nobles alike, and there is a pretty common one about a foolish Ob who tried to overthrow the Zent. But the duchy's name was changed in it, so she never actually connected the dots that this was Ehrenfest of the past. She just assumed it was merely a cautionary tale. So she wants to know if they have any written records that she can compare with what she has. They're incredibly old and written in a hard-to-read language, but that won't be a problem for her. Now she can cross-reference this with the oral traditions and the history they have in the archducal family. But the Geeb is more concerned with her thoughts on the story itself. It actually made her feel bad for the current king because ruling without a Grutricite is just that much harder, but that's an odd takeaway here. He wants to know what she thinks Ob Ehrenfest needs as a ruler of a duchy still suffering a punishment that can't use its country gate. So she thinks it's about moving the duchy forward with like a new industry or something, but that's not what Geeb Kernberger's looking for. He focuses on how their duchy needs to serve the true king without being swayed, and Wilfried is a pretty poor fit in that regard, because he's constantly being blown by the whims of others. That really relates to his character in the last few books. Ortwind, Lestalot, Oswald, these are all people who pushed him to act when he didn't need to. But how does Geeb Kernberger know this? Well, his son is Alexis, Wilfried's guard knight. However, just because Alexis is in his service, doesn't mean that he has Geeb Kernberger's support. And he wants to know what made Sylvester take Geeb Groshel's daughter as his second wife when he had refused one for so long. Further, why was Wilfried courting the Lies Gang support so hard? Now Rosemine stomps that out by saying she was against Brunhilde taking the position in the first place because of Sylvester's love for Florencia, and he came to the decision himself to stabilize the duchy. And also, Wilfried's the next Ob, so obviously he would want the Lies Gang support. If Rosemine were to listen to Geeb Kernberger here, she'd be letting herself get swayed by him into pursuing the seat of Archduchess, you know, like he's clearly pushing her towards. So he finally sees her stance and decides to call it there. They return to the estate where the records are dug up for Rosemine. There she transcribes them for later use because there's not much time. They're leaving as soon as the Plankton Company and the Gutenbergs are all set up. What she finds out is this isn't a story, but a transcription of yearly reports to the king about former Eisenreich nobles and Bosguy's merchants. So the poorer people from Bosguy's likely became traveling merchants because they couldn't afford citizenship. Those were most likely Otto's ancestors. The richer ones, however, they could actually afford it. Bet you didn't expect that to come full circle. After spring prayer, she returns to the temple, ready to accept the new apprentice blue rubs and such. But first she needs to hear a report from Cornelius, who's been in contact with Lamprecht about Wilfried. Rosemine asks if Wilfried has been influenced by the Lies Gangs, but Cornelius corrects her saying that he's actually caught between his pride and duty. Now Lamprecht actually wants her to help out, but her retainers flat out tell her not to. Whatever advice she offers up right now will most likely be taken in the wrong way and feel like salt thrown on the wound. Yeah, the trip for spring prayer he was so looking forward to and winning over the Lies Gangs during ended in absolute failure. It's more complicated than that, obviously, as Wilfried is swallowing a lot of emotions right now. As Geeb Kernberger feared, he is being influenced, but there's multiple parties fighting for control over him. And then there's the fact that Wilfried himself is feeling disillusioned with his role in the duchy. That comes to a head in Volume 6. The epilogue picks up from Alexis's perspective. He's heading home to speak with his father about Rosemine's recent visit on orders from Wilfried. He's pretty anxious about this job, since he hopes that Rosemine made a poor impression, and his father will now back Wilfried for Ob. But once he actually gets the chance to speak to him, we find out it's the exact opposite. This isn't a conversation between father and son, but between an archducal retainer and a Geeb. So what were his father's thoughts on Rosemine now that he's finally met her in person? She spoke only of supporting Wilfried for Ob, and clearly doesn't want the seat for herself. So does that mean his father has changed his mind about supporting her?
Absolutely not. In fact, he thinks she's even more fit for the role now, because her perspective aligns with what he wants in an Archduke, mainly using her faction without becoming its puppet like Sylvester did. Alexis tries to speak up in defense of Wilfried here, but we get some insight that Kernberger might be a backwater province, but its lord is no slouch in gathering information. He's still an archnoble who weathered Veronica's reign despite being neutral. He calls out Alexis's petty attempts for what they are. Bullshit. And asks whose words he's actually speaking here. It's Oswald, obviously. Wilfried is a far superior Archduke candidate who doesn't trouble others. But that's only useful for retainers, not the duchy itself. Sure, he's an honor student, so he would be a safe pick for Archduke, but ultimately would end up as a mouthpiece of his retainers' opinions. Well, that's not good news for Alexis, and asks if his father will welcome him home should he be punished. That seems a bit extreme. Is he really going to be punished for his father's views? But we learn that Wilfried threw Lamprecht under the bus after he tried to convince him not to go to the Lies Gang. Dude actually thought he would win them over on a single trip. What the fuck? Yeah, it was clear to anybody who was paying even the least amount of attention that they hate his guts and only supported Rosemine. Wilfried blamed Lamprecht and her for not laying the groundwork for him. His weasel of a namesworn has been licking his wounds by picking up where Oswald left off, saying how she's the Lies Gang princess and shit. Now, Wilfried does know the facts of what Veronica did to the Lies Gangs, but he doesn't realize how deep their hatred runs, because he's mostly been sheltered from it. Now, Alexis is sort of in the same boat. As it turns out, his mother was a Lies Gang who had Bonifatius' first wife help her marry into Kernberger to avoid Veronica. When it came time for Alexis to be baptized and first meet Veronica, he was introduced as Guy Kernberger's son and stuck to his first wife, despite that not being his mother. That was actually to create a mental association in her head. She would assume he was Guy Kernberger's son, not the son of a Lies Gang. Thus, he doesn't have much experience with the but he and his fellow retainers did notice a change after Wilfried returned from the academy, where he seems to be the sole person interested in reviving Veronica's methods. So with his faction in tatters, no Oswald, and Bonifatius yelling at him while comparing him to Rosemine, Wilfried is depressed as hell. What else could have caused all this? I guess Brunhilde being his dad's second wife apparently. That's most likely a holdover from Veronica too, since she was also opposed to her husband taking a second wife. That would have bumped her down in status. Remember, she was merely an archnoble? This does paint a pretty bleak picture, where Wilfried will never be able to escape Veronica's shadow. The thing is, Wilfried is working pretty hard, and Alexis wants to support him. Hell, after they won Ditter, it felt fucking amazing, and he truly thought nothing bad would happen when they returned home. Clearly that wasn't the case and he was being naive. What Alexis does know though, is that he wants to resign and return to Kernberger, but his father hits him with a pretty hard rebuttal. This is just quitting because his lord no longer suits his taste, and that would make him a failure, so he wouldn't be welcomed home. A guard needs to keep their eye out for all threats, and that namesworn of his is definitely a problem. Understand, these kids were forced to give their names, so it's not out of loyalty, but self-preservation. Yeah, they can't refuse an order, but that doesn't mean they can't whisper poison into your ear, which is exactly what's happening. So the Geeb says he should focus on Wilfried's work environment and try to find the root of what caused this change in him and squash it. If Wilfried is straying from his path, Alexis should drag him back onto it. That's his job as a guard knight. However, if he feels that he's gone too far off that path, find the evidence to get his ass disinherited, and that'll get him dismissed. Only then will his father welcome him home without question, because at least then he knew he fulfilled his duty. Yeah, suddenly Alexis realizes that he's been half-heartedly serving his lord, and thus resolves to do better in the future.
So we're finally getting some hints about what's been eating at Wilfried. The Lies Gang plots have been deflected for now, but Wilfried seems to have soured on his family. Where will this lead? It'll be a few volumes before we get answers, but for now we've got side stories to get through.
First up is reflections and envy from Charlotte's perspective. After the announcement that Brunhilde is being taken as a second wife, she's feeling guilty as hell. She exploded at Sylvester during their family meeting, which probably led to this outcome, but she didn't really expect him to take Brunhilde as his wife. She thought he would take an older widow who could control their faction and not have to worry about kids. The issue is, this is super convenient for the Archducal family, but damn if it doesn't feel like they're throwing a wrench into Brunhilde's future. But Charlotte also can't fight this engagement. It has the approval of not just their father, but the Geeb as well. All she can do is make Brunhilde as comfortable as possible when she moves in. And what better way to do that than to invite her for tea after the announcement is made? Charlotte apologizes for all the trouble, but does get the full story. Brunhilde isn't upset, she's actually pretty happy about this engagement. While Charlotte assumed that the second wife's goal would be to unify the Lies gangs under the Ob, Brunhilde tells her that's not necessary. The unified Lies gang faction would only hurt the archducal family, since they want all of Veronica's blood purged. Now Charlotte and Florencia would probably escape that because they suffered too, but Melchior and Wilfried wouldn't. The elders of the Lies gangs are just too jaded to change their views, so it's best to split the faction so they can't rise up. Frankly, Charlotte's impressed that Brunhilde grasped the situation so aptly, and actually has a plan to do it, by forcing the older generation to the fringe. But hey, wasn't she meant to be the next Guy Groschel? About that, Brunhilde gives her a sound blocker and explains that this engagement is her only hope. Her father has a son now, and this will secure better treatment for not just her, but her mother back home. Her father won't be able to ignore his first wife when she's the mother of the Ob's second wife. But also, it's some nice payback to be of higher status than him for once, especially after he's fucked with her future so much. So understand, this is Brunhilde trying to reclaim her future somewhat after her father tore it away from her, and Charlotte of all people can sympathize, considering she was removed from consideration for the seat of Archduke purely based on her sex. However, how does Charlotte and Florencia see this engagement? Well, they view it favorably, since it's going to be a big help for their family. Who would actually go to criticize such a noble decision? Oh wait, Wilfried would. Yeah, he's actually complained to Brunhilde about a marriage decided by the Archduke for the duchy's sake. What an absolute ass. We find out Oswald was relieved of duty in secret, but they waited intentionally until he had returned from the academy. That way he wouldn't be able to leak any information about the purge. He was simply too dedicated to Veronica to continue serving Wilfried. But now Wilfried's acting like this. Yeah, it seems like his retainers are the ones pushing him to do all this crap. So they talk about how Florencia is welcoming Brunhilde, Charlotte helping her integrate into the family, how they're going to push forward with the generational shift plan, and that they need to keep Rosemine away from the Lies gangs as much as possible, because she's never actually socialized with them, and therefore she can't relate to their issues, and it would only shatter their delusions of grandeur. Nobody wants a suicidal faction on their hands, right? And after their meeting, Charlotte speaks to her head attendant about what was discussed since most of it was behind a sound blocker, and ultimately, Charlotte will probably find herself in a pretty similar position to Brunhilde, giving up her position here to marry into another duchy. That makes her wonder, will she still be Rosemine's sister then? And the answer is most assuredly yes, knowing Rosemine. And with that, Charlotte has found her own sense of purpose. Next is Defense of the West Gate from Gunther's perspective. This is a story mostly about Gunther learning about Rosemine's noble life. He's in a meeting for the switching of the gate commander post they do every 3 years. He was at the North Gate, but now he's being moved to the West. And while they're all going over the purge details, they get word of a noble from another duchy trying to get in. They send up the signal to get the Knight's Order over there, and Gunther races off to meet it head on. He's going to be in charge of that gate soon, so might as well take a look. Here he meets Clarissa firsthand, and he's not afraid of her at all. Though he can pick up the pieces that she's from another duchy and one of higher status than the knights speaking to her right now. While the knights go to sort out the whole permit issue, they have the soldiers guide her to a noble waiting room. Clarissa starts to complain about them not knowing that she serves Rosemine, and that kinda ticks Gunther off, so he argues back. You'd expect this to boil over pretty quickly, but they're at an impasse, where Clarissa knows how highly Rosemine views commoners, so she's not gonna hurt him, but also he's trying to push her buttons out of spite. And that's when Damiel shows up and de-escalates things pretty quickly since he's so good at dealing with problems. Eventually they get talking about her noble life from what Clarissa gathered in the academy, while Damiel gives her the rundown of her life in the castle. And suddenly, Gunther thinks she doesn't sound like such a bad person. Yeah, he's starved for information about his daughter. After a while, the scene we saw in the story plays out, where Rosemine shows up solving everything. But afterwards, he heads back home to tell Effa all about it. Camille thinks they're just weird for gushing over Rosemine, but Gunther explains. He'll understand soon enough.
The side stories this time around didn't really give us a ton of deep lore, but instead expanded on the characters quite a bit. And I think Charlotte's was an important inclusion here, due to the fact that it tells us her mental state, gives us some candid thoughts from Brunhilde, and we see more about Wilfried's thought process, which will become important in the next few books. But that's getting ahead of myself. Let's get into my final thoughts and wrap up this volume.
I ended my last video talking about how this wouldn't be a lull in the story, and it wouldn't follow the pattern laid out in part 4. You know, where something big happens and then the next book is spent elaborating on the fallout. That's disrupted here in a few ways, and the thing that does it mainly is Ferdinand's absence. Riardi even says how he would have told Sylvester and Rosemine what they needed to do to sort out the Lies gangs ahead of time. I mean, had he been there? And we even know he has the means to restrain them in his estate. But now Rosemine's the one who has to handle these situations as they arise, showing her own growth as a person. It's up to her because she now has to be involved. And that's one of the biggest shifts from part 4 to 5, along with the scale of events. The Purge has been in the background for 4 volumes now, and while it's already impacted the story somewhat, the Academy was sheltered from the biggest changes. That was partially by design, but also because it's so isolated from the home duchies. But since this is our first time back in Ehrenfest since the start of this part, we can see just how much things have changed in a single season from that major event. As I stated when the Purge first happened, the event itself wasn't the focus, it's the political fallout from it. The former Veronica faction might have been a shadow of its former self by the time Rosemine was baptized, but it was still acting in opposition to the Lies gangs. Without that, we can see why those close to Rosemine never painted the Lies gangs in a virtuous light. From day one, they were trying to keep her away from them. They may sympathize with the brutal treatment they suffered, but they were under no illusions that Ehrenfest would suddenly become a shining beacon with them at the helm, because this volume proved exactly what they were after. With Veronica and the nobles opposing them out of the picture, they want power for its own sake. Decades of mistreatment have left the elders of that faction vengeful, and Rosemine's mere existence gives them someone they hope to manipulate and control as the next Archduchess. And even with their mastermind now dead, they're still employing plots and manipulation to seize what power they can, whether it's good for Ehrenfest as a whole or not. So what was their plan to restrain the Lies gangs? Guy Kernberger already mentioned his worry about Wilfried being swayed by his retainers, but Sylvester is really no better in his eyes. His mother was first, and then his faction, and even after cutting them off completely, most probably assumed that Ferdinand was the one pulling his strings after that. So the Lies gangs laid the bait to be the next ones to try and be his puppet masters. However, Brunhilde's engagement was likely not what they were expecting. Even for the audience, it seems to come out of left field, but makes effective use of her character nonetheless. She's someone who's been with Rosemine since part 4, so we saw her growth firsthand. Not just as she strived for Groschel and Ehrenfest to be popular, but also that she's reevaluated herself and how she conducts business. With her high position in the Lies gang family, and them unaware that she's more in the Florencia faction than theirs, it makes her the perfect person to divide the Lies gangs from within, so they don't unify and pose a serious threat to the Archducal family. However, you'll notice that these are all measures against the Lies gangs. They haven't actually been dealt with just yet. And for that, we'll have to wait until a future volume. The Country Gate was honestly a really unexpected lore dump we didn't know we wanted, not just on Ehrenfest history, but the country itself, and a place you'd least expect it. And these are things that have been in the background of this story since the beginning. Oto was a traveling merchant, free to talk to her grandfather about how the lower city was formed back in part 2. Part 4 has Gieb Haldenzel talking about the now exhausted iron mine in the north, and this clues us into why Ehrenfest was such a low-ranking duchy before the Civil War. Everyone looked down on them because they're the remnants of an old duchy that betrayed the king and had their country gate closed. They only have a mere 200 years of history, according to Lestalot. And yes, I will always find some way to bring that back up, for some reason. The whole Gabrielle incident is still very fresh in many of the upper-ranked duchies' minds, too. So it really makes Ehrenfest's treatment click into place, because we know these upper-ranked duchies have a long memory. But on top of that, there's a whole lot of world building here, as we're hearing about another country aside from Lanzanov, what those countries want, which is foreshadowing for the motives to come, and even what the world looks like on the other side of the country gate. These will all become relevant in the next few books. And this was a great way to introduce them while also tying up some threads from earlier in this story. Guy Kernberger talked about the names sworn in the epilogue, how these kids were forced to give their names, so they didn't swear themselves out of loyalty, but out of self-preservation. That does mean a few things. They may not be able to defy orders and can be killed by their lords fairly easily, but it sets up a really nasty trap that nobody was really expecting. One where they won't go directly against you, but will use the assumption of trust as a weapon. Bartold is in the process of doing this with Wilfried, and feeding Wilfried lies to grow his insecurity to the point it negatively impacts his relationship with his family. This becomes a point down the line, and one I hinted at a few videos ago, but the idea was brought up that name swearing is this end-all be-all of trust, and the idea is that yes, you can trust these people, but what they do with that trust is something you can't predict. So how they've strayed from what the idea of name swearing used to be by using it in this way is a subtle piece in this story that I don't think many people notice until it's brought up later on. Eustace, Eckhart, Losfam, and Roderick are prime examples of how name swearing should be, done not by force, but as a show of absolute loyalty that you trust someone enough to give them the power to end your life. In essence, these kids' lives were already over, and name swearing just extended it. They have nothing left to lose. So really, Rosemine's incredibly lucky to have attracted the right sort of people to swear their names to her. I left off last volume talking about Wilfried's heel turn, and it still hasn't really fully manifested here. At least not for Rosemine. But what some people may not have picked up on, and I'm trying to draw attention to, is just how much Wilfried's been caught in a vulnerable position. He lost his head attendant, someone he trusted his entire life. Though letting him go was probably the best choice, the dude was manipulative as hell. But Wilfried is always a product of Veronica. He's always been associated with her faction, despite his best efforts trying to be in the Florencia faction. And now he's lost his entire support base, people who actually wanted him to be Ob. The new majority power is actively opposing him, the neutral nobles despise him for being an easily manipulated puppet, and he now has a namesworn who's reinforcing every negative reaction he has while directing it over at Rosemine. The kid is starting to act out because he doesn't really know what to do. Ultimately, he's faced with a crisis, that he doesn't really know who he is or what he wants to be. Yes, he's been groomed to be the next Archduke, but with everything crumbling around him, he's forced to come face to face with not just what that job would actually mean, but realizing no one actually likes him. So yeah, now he's bitter and frustrated, all while feeling like the underpinning of his entire identity was ripped out from under him. This is a really hard period to like Wilfried in this story, but this is actually the culmination of his entire story arc. The spoiled prince type realizing he's not fit for the role he's been bred for since birth. So, how does he handle it? Well, we'll find out in future volumes, but it's gonna get ugly before it gets better.
So that's it. We finished Volume 4, and there was probably a lot that happened that you weren't expecting. The Purge was, as expected, a complete shit show that left them with no manpower, and in the face of that, they're now staring down an extra busy Archduke conference where Rosemine has to help the royal family. The Lies gangs and their bullshit is gonna have to wait, because Prince Sigiswald's Starbind, the path to a true Zend, and Rosemine getting swept up in the royal family's plot is on the horizon. But for now though, hey, you've made it to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and do all the other YouTube stuff to help the channel grow. You can also join my Discord with a link down in the description. And if you really want to support me, you can head on over to my Patreon and pick up some extra perks. And speaking of Patreon, I'd like to give a special thanks to Ariel Autumn Sage Stott, Jmon33A, Pokeflute, Robin DBL, Samuel Chen, Tristan, and Vonstrom for their continued support. Thanks for watching.